Fido flees with children into the forest and finds a prehistoric couple living there. Sarah Mitchell never imagined that one day she would be running in the middle of the night with her 3 young children, fleeing from the only family she had left after becoming a widow 2 years ago. Her heart was pounding out of rhythm as she carried baby Ethan in her arms and pulled the other 2 boys by the hand, 8-year-old Benjamin and 6-year-old Noah. It was when she discovered the papers hidden in her mother-in-law's drawer that her life turned upside down. Forged documents, false medical statements, and a conversation recorded on Mrs. Margaret's cell phone proving she had bribed a social worker to fabricate cases of negligence against Sarah. The plan was simple: take custody of the children and keep the pension and life insurance that David, her late husband, had left. "Mommy, my foot hurts," complained Noah, stumbling on the dark road. "Just a little bit longer, sweetheart." "We'll find a safe place," Sarah replied, trying to disguise the desperation in her voice. The old car she had bought with her last savings began to make strange noises. The engine coughed and smoked until it finally stopped for good in the middle of the road that cut through the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. It was almost 3 in the morning, and there were no gas stations or towns nearby. "The car broke down, right, Mommy?" Benjamin asked, with that sharp perception children have. "Yes, son, but we'll get help. We need to get off the road." Sarah looked around, feeling a chill in her stomach. There was only dense forest on both sides. She grabbed the backpack with the few belongings she had managed to gather in a hurry and began walking along the nearest trail, carrying Ethan, who had fallen asleep in her arms. The 2 boys followed her in silence, sensing the gravity of the situation, even without fully understanding. The forest was dense and dark, and dry branches snapped under their feet, and mysterious sounds echoed among the trees. Sarah tried to orient herself by the faint moonlight, but soon lost all sense of direction. "Mommy, I'm thirsty," Noah murmured. "Me too," Benjamin added. Sarah stopped and opened the water bottle she had brought, rationing small sips for each one. Ethan woke up and began to cry softly. She rocked him, trying to calm him down, but the baby sensed her tension. It was then that they heard voices coming from somewhere nearby. Sarah hid behind a large tree, pulling the boys close to her. "There's someone there," she whispered, afraid they were people sent by Mrs. Margaret to look for them. But the voices didn't sound like pursuers. They were calm conversations, almost whispers. Sarah gathered her courage and slowly approached, following the sound. What she saw made her freeze in surprise. Ahead was a small clearing where a strange structure rose among the rocks. It looked like a cave, but modified with stacked stones forming walls. Outside, a low fire still burned, and 2 adults were talking quietly. The man had long, unkempt hair and a beard, and wore clothes that seemed made of leather and rough fabrics. The woman beside him had long hair tied up simply, and wore a kind of brown tunic that reached her feet. Both were barefoot. Sarah was dumbfounded. It was as if she had found people from another time living there. But before she could decide what to do, Benjamin tripped on a root and fell, making noise. "Who's there?" The man stood up quickly, looking in their direction. Sarah felt her heart race. There was no way to hide anymore. She stepped out from behind the tree, holding Ethan in her arms with the 2 boys clinging to her legs. "Please don't be afraid," the man said, and Sarah was shocked to hear perfect English without any strange accent. "Are you lost?" The woman also approached, and Sarah noticed that despite her rustic appearance, there was something gentle and polite in the way she moved. Our car broke down on the road," Sarah stammered. "We're looking for help." "Come, sit here by the fire. The night is cold," the woman said, gesturing for them to come closer. Sarah hesitated, but Noah was shivering from the cold, and Ethan was crying louder. She didn't have many options. "My name is James, and this is my wife Elizabeth," the man introduced himself as they settled near the flames. "What are your names?" "Sarah. These are my children, Benjamin, Noah, and the baby Ethan." Elizabeth looked at the children with a strange tenderness, as if she hadn't seen children in a long time. "You must be hungry. I have some warm soup here," she said, stirring an iron pot over the embers. "Thank you, but we don't want to be a bother. If you could just tell us how to get back to the road. At this time of night? With small children? James shook his head. It's very dangerous. Stay here tonight. Early tomorrow I can take you back. Sarah looked around, trying to understand the situation. How were two seemingly normal people living in such a primitive way in the middle of the woods? Do you live here? She asked, curious. James and Elizabeth exchanged a quick glance, as if sharing a secret. For some time now, yes, James replied vaguely. Elizabeth served the soup in wooden bowls. The smell was delicious, and Sarah realized she was very hungry. The children also ate eagerly. How did you end up here? Elizabeth asked, while rocking Ethan, who had stopped crying in her arms. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. How to explain the whole situation without sounding crazy? We're running away, she said finally. My mother-in-law wants to take my children from me. Why? Elizabeth asked, with genuine concern. She thinks I'm a bad mother, that I can't take care of them alone, Sarah lied partially, not wanting to go into details about the fake documents. James was watching Benjamin and Noah, who were playing with twigs near the fire. These children seem very well cared for, he said. Healthy, polite. I don't see any neglect. The observation touched Sarah deeply. It had been so long since anyone recognized her efforts as a mother. Do you have children? She asked. The silence that followed was tense. James and Elizabeth looked at each other again, and Elizabeth pressed Ethan against her chest. We did, she said softly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. It's all right, James said, but his voice was different. It happened a long time ago. Sarah realized she had touched a deep wound. That would explain why they had chosen to isolate themselves from the world. Mom, can I explore the cave? Benjamin asked, already standing. No, son. We're going to sleep soon. Let them look, Elizabeth said. It's safe. James built everything very well. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah watched the boys enter the stone structure, fascinated. It was truly impressive how James had built it. The walls were solid and there were several internal divisions. Are you an architect? She asked. Not exactly, he replied, but I've always been good with my hands. Elizabeth was humming softly to Ethan, a melody Sarah didn't recognize. The baby was completely relaxed. That's a beautiful song, Sarah commented. It was my son's favorite, Elizabeth said, her voice choked. Sarah felt a pang in her heart. She began to understand why this couple had chosen to live in isolation. The pain of losing a child was something she couldn't even imagine. How long have you lived here? She asked delicately. 15 years, James answered. 15 years. Sarah couldn't hide her astonishment. In the beginning we thought it would be temporary, Elizabeth explained, but then we couldn't go back anymore. Benjamin and Noah came out of the cave, excited. Mom, there are real beds in there, and even books, Benjamin told her. Books? Sarah looked at Elizabeth with curiosity. I am a teacher, Elizabeth said. I've always loved to read. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together in Sarah's mind. James and Elizabeth weren't primitive people. They were normal people who had chosen to withdraw from civilization for some painful reason. Don't you ever miss the city? She asked. Every day, James admitted. But here the pain is more bearable. Ethan had fallen asleep in Elizabeth's lap, who was rocking him with a maternal tenderness that deeply touched Sarah. You're very good with babies, she commented. I took care of many during my teaching years, Elizabeth said, but Sarah sensed there was more to that story. We'd better go to sleep, James suggested. Tomorrow I can try to get help for your car. How? Sarah asked. I thought you had no contact with the outside. We have methods, he said vaguely. Elizabeth took Ethan inside the cave, followed by Benjamin and Noah. Sarah stayed alone with James by the fire for a few moments. May I ask what happened to you? She said softly. To end up living like this? James stirred the embers with a stick before answering. "We lost our son in a very traumatic situation," he said. "And after that, we discovered our previous life was full of lies and toxic people. We decided to start over, far away from everything and everyone." "I'm so sorry," Sarah said sincerely. "And you? Why are you really running away?" he asked, looking directly at her. Sarah took a deep breath. There was something about this man that inspired trust. "My mother-in-law forged documents to prove I'm a neglectful mother. She wants to keep the money my husband left and use the children to do it. I discovered her plan by chance and ran away with them." James nodded gravely. "People capable of using children for their own benefit are dangerous," he said. "You did the right thing by running. But where do I go now?" Sarah felt the tears coming. "I have no money. I have nowhere to go. What if she finds me?" "We'll think about that tomorrow," James said kindly. "Today you are safe." Inside the cave, Elizabeth had prepared makeshift beds with dry leaves and fabrics. The children were already fast asleep, exhausted from the journey. Sarah lay down next to Ethan, but sleep wouldn't come. She watched Elizabeth, who was sitting in a corner organizing some objects. Even in the dim light, she could see they were textbooks and notebooks. "Do you still teach?" Sarah whispered. "To the birds," Elizabeth answered with a sad smile. "Sometimes I pretend I'm in a classroom explaining math to the squirrels. It must be hard to leave a profession you loved." "The hardest part was leaving the children," Elizabeth confessed. "I taught elementary school. I had students the age of Benjamin and Noah. Why didn't you go back? Other schools would need experienced teachers." Elizabeth was quiet for a long time before answering. "When our son passed, I was pregnant with another baby. With the trauma, I ended up losing that child too. After that, I couldn't be near children anymore without falling apart inside." Sarah felt her heart tighten. She imagined this woman's pain, who clearly loved children, having to deprive herself of them to try to heal her own wound. "But today, seeing you all here, it was the first time in 15 years that I felt whole again," Elizabeth continued, looking at the sleeping Ethan. Sarah woke up to Ethan crying and realized it was already morning. Elizabeth was outside preparing something for breakfast, and James was nowhere in sight. "Good morning," Elizabeth said. "James went to check on something. He'll be back soon." "Check on what?" "Your car. He understands mechanics." Sarah was surprised. That man had many skills for someone who had lived in isolation for 15 years. "Was he a mechanic before?" "A doctor," Elizabeth said simply. "A doctor?" Sarah nearly dropped the bowl of porridge Elizabeth was offering her. "A heart surgeon, to be more precise, one of the best in the country." Sarah was speechless. A renowned heart surgeon living like a primitive in the woods. "But how?" "It's a long story," Elizabeth sighed, "and a painful one." Benjamin and Noah woke up excited, wanting to explore more of the cave house, as they called it. Elizabeth took them to see a vegetable garden she kept in a nearby clearing. "We have tomatoes, lettuce, green onions, all organic," she explained to the boys, who were fascinated. "How do you manage to live without going to the supermarket?" Benjamin asked with the typical curiosity of his age. "Nature gives us everything we need if we know where to look," Elizabeth replied, showing medicinal plants and fruit trees. Sarah watched the interaction and noticed how Elizabeth lit up when she was with the children. It was natural, spontaneous. She wondered what kind of teacher she must have been. James returned mid-morning with news about the car. "Problem with the fuel pump," he said. "I'll need some parts to fix it." "Where are we going to get parts out here?" Sarah asked. "I have a contact in the nearest town. He can bring what we need." "A contact? I thought you didn't speak to anyone." "Not exactly anyone," James explained. "Mr. Henry is a discreet man who sometimes helps us with supplies. He knows where we live, but never tells anyone. And he comes here. He leaves things at an agreed-upon location. It's safer that way." Sarah was intrigued by this system. Why did a former surgeon and a former teacher need so much secrecy? During the day, she observed the place where they lived more closely. It wasn't just a primitive cave. James had built an ingenious rainwater collection system, a kind of remote bathroom that didn't pollute the environment and even an area for preserving food. "This must have taken years to build," she commented. "The first years were the hardest," James admitted. "We had to learn a lot from scratch." "But why choose such a complicated life? I know you lost a child, but there were other ways to deal with the pain." James stopped organizing his improvised tools and looked at her. "Sarah, have you ever been in a situation where you realized everything in your life was based on lies, where the people you trusted most betrayed you irreversibly?" "I'm going through that now," she replied softly. "Then you understand. Sometimes the only way to start over is by starting from scratch. Literally." Elizabeth approached them, holding Noah's hand. "Mum, Aunt Elizabeth said she can teach me to read better," Noah told her excitedly. "Oh, you don't need to worry about that." "I would really like to," Elizabeth gently interrupted. "If you don't mind. It's been so long since I've helped a child with their studies." Sarah looked at Elizabeth's hopeful face and couldn't bring herself to refuse. "Of course, if Noah wants to." During the afternoon, Elizabeth improvised an outdoor lesson. She used twigs to write letters in the dirt and leaves to teach basic math. Benjamin joined in too, fascinated by the forest teacher's different methods. Sarah watched in admiration. Elizabeth was truly talented. The children were learning and having fun at the same time. "She's amazing," Sarah commented to James. "One of the best teachers I've ever known," he agreed. She had several offers to teach at expensive private schools, but she always preferred working with underprivileged children. "And you? Do you miss medicine?" "Every day," he admitted. "But after what happened, I can't set foot in a hospital anymore without having panic attacks." Sarah realized there was a much deeper story behind their choice. It wasn't just the pain of losing a child. There was something more. In the late afternoon, while the children played in a nearby puddle, Elizabeth sat down next to Sarah. "May I ask how your husband passed away?" she said delicately. "A heart attack," Sarah replied. "Very sudden. He was only 32 and always healthy." "How old was Ethan when it happened?" 3 months. I was still breastfeeding." Elizabeth shook her head, moved. "That must have been terrible, being left alone with 3 small children." "My mother-in-law helped me at first," Sarah recounted. "That's why I trusted her. I thought she truly cared about me and her grandchildren. I never imagined she was just waiting for the right moment to pull her scheme." "Did your husband suspect anything about his mother?" Sarah paused to think. In truth, David had always been somewhat distant from his family. He preferred to be alone with her and the children. "I think he knew something was wrong, but he never wanted to worry me," she reflected. "Mrs. Margaret was always very controlling. David married me somewhat secretly because she didn't approve of me." "Why?" "I came from a simple family. She wanted him to marry the daughter of a businessman friend of hers." Elizabeth frowned. What kind of person plans their children's lives like that? "The kind who is capable of forging documents to take her grandchildren's money," Sarah said bitterly. That night during dinner, Ethan started running a fever. Sarah was desperate. She had no medicine, and they were far from any medical resources. "Let me examine him," James requested. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but the fever was high and she had no choice. James examined the baby with a skill that made it clear he really was a doctor. His movements were precise and confident. "It's just a simple virus," he said, "but we need to bring the fever down." He went to a part of the cave where he kept various jars and containers. He returned with some herbs. "Elderberry tea and a castor leaf compress," he explained. "Completely natural and safe for babies." Sarah watched as he prepared the home remedy. Within minutes, Ethan was calmer and the fever began to subside. "How do you know all this?" she asked, amazed. "When we decided to live here, I had to learn alternative medicine," James explained. "I couldn't prescribe traditional medications anymore, so I studied medicinal plants." "But you're still a licensed doctor. You could go back to practicing." James was quiet for a moment, organizing the jars. "My license was revoked," he said finally. Sarah felt a shock. A doctor didn't lose his license over just anything. "May I ask why?" "Medical error," he said simply. "At least that's what they said." Elizabeth approached and placed a hand on her husband's shoulder. "It wasn't a medical error," she said firmly. It was sabotage. Elizabeth, she needs to know the truth, James, especially after what happened to her. Sarah felt a chill. There was something in the way Elizabeth spoke that put her on alert. What kind of sabotage? She asked cautiously. James looked at Elizabeth as if asking for permission. She nodded. Our son, Michael, was 8 years old when he was diagnosed with a complex heart condition, he began. I performed the surgery myself. Everything went perfectly. But did he recover? Initially, yes. But on the third night after the surgery, someone tampered with his medication. They switched the medicine for a placebo. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Michael went into cardiac arrest and we couldn't reverse it, James continued, his voice choked. And since I was the lead surgeon, I was blamed for medical malpractice. But how do you know it was sabotage? Because we found out who did it, Elizabeth said with contained anger. And why? The health insurance company was trying to get rid of expensive cases, James explained. My son was a treatment that would cost a lot of money for years. It was cheaper to let him go and blame me for the error. Sarah was horrified. It was an unimaginable cruelty. Did you prove it? We tried, but the insurance company had political and economic influence. They bought witnesses, falsified documents, intimidated other doctors, Elizabeth said. In the end, James not only lost his license but was also threatened with prison. That's when we decided to disappear, James concluded. We couldn't bear to live in a world where people are capable of killing a child for money. The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah looked at her own sleeping children and felt a mix of anger and fear. People really were capable of the greatest atrocities when money was involved. That's why you understand my situation, she said softly. More than you imagine, Elizabeth confirmed. Ethan had improved completely with James's treatment. On the second day, he was playing normally in Elizabeth's arms, who couldn't stop doting on him. You have a natural knack for this, Sarah commented. I took care of Michael alone during the first years, Elizabeth explained. James worked a lot, so I was the one who gave baths, changed diapers, stayed up through the night when he had colic. It must be hard to see Ethan and remember all that. Actually, it's been healing, Elizabeth confessed. For the first time in 15 years, I feel like I can hold a child without falling apart. Sarah began to understand that their arrival there wasn't just a coincidence. Somehow, they were helping Elizabeth and James heal old wounds, just as the couple was helping her find a direction for her life. On the third day, Mr. Henry brought the car parts, but he also brought worrying news. Mrs. Sarah, there are some men asking about you in town, he reported. They said you kidnapped the children. Sarah's blood ran cold. Was it the police? They didn't look like police. They were in a black pickup truck, all in suits. Kind of suspicious, if you ask my opinion. Sarah felt her legs weaken. Mrs. Margaret had found out where they had gone. What did you tell them? That I've never seen you in my life, Mr. Henry answered. But they didn't seem to believe it much. James and Elizabeth exchanged worried looks. You can't go back now, James said. It's too risky. But I also can't stay here forever, Sarah said desperately. I need to resolve this situation. Maybe we can help, Elizabeth suggested. How? We have contacts who can legally investigate your mother-in-law's situation, James explained. People who know how to deal with corruption schemes. Sarah looked at them with hope, but also with apprehension. What kind of contacts? Investigative journalists, honest prosecutors, people who help victims of injustice, Elizabeth said. The same network that tried to help us back then. They couldn't save you, Sarah observed, because they arrived too late. In your case, there's still time, James said with conviction. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. Sarah thought about the proposal. She didn't have many options. Running away wouldn't solve the problem, and sooner or later Mrs. Margaret would find her. What would I need to do? First, gather all the evidence you can about the fake documents, Elizabeth said. You said you heard a recorded conversation? Yes, on her phone, but it's at her house. We need to recover that recording, James said. It's crucial evidence. How? Her house must be watched now. Leave that to us, Elizabeth said mysteriously. Sarah was curious about how two people who had lived in isolation for 15 years could have so many contacts and resources. You're not just a couple running from pain, she realized. There's something more to this story. James and Elizabeth exchanged another look. In that silent form of communication, only couples who have been together for many years develop. Tell her, Elizabeth said. She needs to know who she's trusting. James took a deep breath. After we lost Michael and our credibility was destroyed, we decided to use our knowledge to help other people in similar situations. He began. What kind of knowledge? James knows how to recognize signs of poisoning, medication tampering, falsification of medical documents, Elizabeth explained. And I know how to identify psychological manipulation, emotional blackmail, forgery of educational reports. You've seen that many similar cases. More than you can imagine, James said gravely. The scheme that destroyed our family is just the tip of the iceberg. There's an entire network of people who take advantage of the most diverse situations to make money. Life insurance, inheritances, child custody, forced psychiatric hospitalizations. Sarah felt a chill. It was like discovering there was a dark world parallel to the normal world she knew. And you help the victims? When we can, Elizabeth said. We work with honest lawyers, investigative journalists, prosecutors who really care about justice. But always anonymously, James added. Officially, James Thompson and Elizabeth Harris disappeared 15 years ago. Thompson? Sarah repeated. James Thompson, I know that name. Probably from the newspapers back then, he said sadly. Negligent surgeon kills his own son was headline news for weeks. Sarah vaguely remembered the case. At the time, she was pregnant with Benjamin and didn't pay much attention to the news. But now she understood why they had hidden. The media had completely destroyed their reputation. So, you really can help me? We can try, Elizabeth said, but you need to trust us completely. And you need to be prepared to discover much worse things about your mother-in-law. Worse like what? Sarah, you said your husband died of a heart attack at 32, being healthy. Doesn't that seem suspicious to you? James's comment hit her like a bolt of lightning. She had never questioned the naturalness of David's death. He was fine, they had dinner together, went to sleep, and in the morning she found him lifeless. You think that? I think we need to investigate everything from the beginning, James said, including the circumstances of your husband's passing. Sarah felt the world spin. The possibility that David hadn't died of natural causes had never crossed her mind. But how? He was fine the night before. There are substances that can cause cardiac arrest in young, healthy people, James explained gently, and many of them aren't detected in routine autopsies. You think, Mrs. Margaret? It's a hypothesis that needs to be investigated, Elizabeth said. If she's capable of forging documents to take your children, she might be capable of worse things. Sarah sat down heavily on a rock. Her head was spinning with all these possibilities. If this is true, she planned everything 2 years ago. The widowhood to make me vulnerable, the emotional dependence for me to trust her, and now the final blow to take the children and the money. It's a pattern we've seen before, Elizabeth confirmed sadly. But why David? He was her son. Sometimes the worst monsters are within the family itself, James said. And it might be that David discovered something about his mother and became a threat. Sarah thought about her husband's last weeks of life. He really was acting strange, worried about something. He would spend hours on the phone talking quietly and avoided leaving her alone with Mrs. Margaret. He was trying to protect me, she realized with tears in her eyes. Probably, Elizabeth said gently, moving closer to comfort her. How are we going to prove all this? Step by step, James said. First, we'll contact our allies. Then we'll plan how to recover the evidence that's at your mother-in-law's house. What if she finds out we're investigating? That's why we'll act fast, Elizabeth said, and that's why you'll stay here, hidden, until it's safe. Sarah looked at her children, who were playing happily, unaware of the gravity of the situation. Benjamin was teaching Noah how to make bracelets with plant fibers Elizabeth had shown them, and Ethan was crawling among the rocks, exploring everything with the typical curiosity of his age. "They're okay here," she observed. "Children adapt more easily than adults," Elizabeth said. "For them, this is an adventure. And for me, it's a never-ending nightmare." "It will end," James said firmly. "We'll discover the truth and put your mother-in-law in jail where she belongs." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about David, trying to remember any signs she might have missed. He had lost weight in the last few weeks, complained of stomach pains, was always tired. "Symptoms of gradual poisoning," she murmured to herself. Elizabeth, who was also awake, heard her. "Are you thinking about your husband? Trying to remember details? Now that you've planted this suspicion, I can see things that seemed normal at the time. It's hard to accept that someone close could be capable of something like that. How did you find out Michael was sabotaged? A brave nurse came to tell us a few months later," Elizabeth explained. "She saw when they switched the medication, but was threatened into silence. She only managed to speak when she was sure she couldn't be traced." "And what did you do with that information?" "We tried to report it, but our word was worthless against a powerful corporation. The nurse was transferred to another state and then disappeared." "Disappeared how?" "We never managed to contact her again. She might have changed her identity out of fear, or—" Elizabeth didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. When a lot of money was involved, people could literally disappear. "That's why you disappeared too." "We realized we were next on the list," Elizabeth confirmed. The next day, James left early to make contacts through Mr. Henry. Elizabeth stayed with Sarah and the children, trying to maintain a normal routine so as not to worry the little ones. "Aunt Elizabeth, why is Mommy sad?" Noah asked during the improvised morning lesson. "Sometimes adults get worried about complicated things," Elizabeth explained delicately. "But it's nothing you need to worry about." "Is it because of Grandma Margaret?" Benjamin asked, showing he understood more about the situation than they imagined. Sarah and Elizabeth exchanged looks. "Benjamin, what do you know about Grandma Margaret?" Sarah asked. "I know she talks badly about you when she thinks we're not listening, and I know she messes with Daddy's things when you're not home." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "What kind of things? Papers? Medicine?" "Once I saw her putting something in the vitamin shake Daddy drank every day." Elizabeth held Sarah's arm, sensing she was about to collapse. "Benjamin, this is very important," Elizabeth said calmly. "Do you remember when this happened?" "It was just before Dad got sick," Benjamin replied, not fully understanding the gravity of what he was revealing. Sarah began to cry. The confirmation of her suspicions was devastating, yet it brought a strange relief. David hadn't died from an unforeseen health problem. He had been murdered, and now she knew by whom. "Benjamin, have you told anyone about this?" "I tried to tell you once, but Grandma Margaret said I was making up stories. Said kids have too much imagination." "Was she there when you tried to tell me?" "Yes, and then she scolded me, said I couldn't go around spreading lies about her." Sarah vaguely remembered the situation. Benjamin had tried to tell her something about his grandmother, but she had been busy caring for newborn Ethan, and really thought it was just a child's fantasy. "My love, you were very brave," she said, hugging Benjamin, "and you didn't make anything up. Everything you saw was true." "You mean Grandma Margaret hurt Dad?" "We're going to find that out," Elizabeth said. "But now you know why we're here. We're protecting ourselves." Noah, who had been following the conversation without understanding everything, approached his mother. "Mommy, is Grandma Margaret mean?" Sarah didn't know how to explain to a 6-year-old that their grandmother was capable of murder. She's not a good person, son. That's why we're away from her." "But she always gave me candies," Noah said, confused. "Sometimes bad people do nice things to trick others," Elizabeth explained gently. James returned in the late afternoon with news. "I managed to get in touch with the journalist Patricia Anderson. She's interested in the case," he reported. "Patricia Anderson, the one from TV?" "Ex-TV. Now she works independently investigating corruption cases. She's the one who helped us when we tried to report the health insurance scheme." "And what did she say?" "That she already had her eye on the social worker who falsified your documents. Apparently there are several similar complaints against her." Is that good? Very good. It means you're not the only victims. With several people harmed, it's easier to build a solid case, Elizabeth explained. Patricia wants to meet with you, James continued, but it has to be in a safe and neutral location. Where? There's an abandoned church about 5 kilometers from here. The priest who looks after it is discreet and trustworthy. Sarah took a deep breath. It was the first concrete action to try to resolve her situation. When? Tomorrow night. Elizabeth will stay with the children while I take you there. That night, Sarah organized everything she remembered about the last months of David's life and about Mrs. Margaret's strange behavior. Elizabeth helped her make a timeline of events. Look, Elizabeth pointed to the notes. David started getting sick exactly 1 week after receiving the first payment from the life insurance policy he had taken out. How do you know about the insurance? Patricia investigated the public documents. Mrs. Margaret is the secondary beneficiary if something happens to you and the children. Sarah was shocked. Secondary beneficiary, but I never authorized that. They probably forged your signature, James suggested. It's more common than you think. So if she manages to take the children from me, and if something happens to you, she gets everything, Elizabeth finished. The meeting with Patricia Anderson happened on a moonless night. James led Sarah through the forest using paths only he knew. The abandoned church was a melancholy place, but perfect for a discreet meeting. Patricia was a woman in her early 50s, with graying hair, simple clothes, but intelligent and determined eyes. Sarah, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning, she said, recording the conversation on a small device. Sarah recounted the entire story. The sudden widowhood, the emotional dependence created by Mrs. Margaret, the discovery of the fake documents, the escape with the children. And now your son confirmed he saw his grandmother tampering with medications. Yes, at the time, I thought it was a child's imagination. Children are often very reliable witnesses. They see things adults overlook, Patricia said. I'll need to interview Benjamin as well, but carefully so as not to traumatize him. He might get scared. I have experience with children. I know how to do this without frightening them. James told her about his analysis of the case and the similarities to other schemes they had investigated. Dr. Thompson, do you still have access to toxicological analysis methods? Limited, but yes. Why? I need you to analyze some personal items of the late David. If we can prove poisoning, we have a homicide case. What kind of items? Toothbrush, clothes he wore, anything that might have residue, Patricia explained. But those things are in Mrs. Margaret's house, Sarah said. That's why we'll need to retrieve them, Patricia said calmly. How? The house must be under watch. Leave that to me. I have contacts in the area. Sarah left the meeting with a mix of hope and apprehension. She finally had a professional helping, but what they might discover could be even worse than she imagined. Back at the hideout, Elizabeth was anxiously waiting for news. How did it go? She's going to investigate everything, but she needs physical evidence. James can help with that, Elizabeth said. He has equipment here that he brought from when he practiced medicine. Sarah looked around the cave, noticing for the first time details she had ignored. There were adapted medical instruments, bottles with various substances, even a precision scale. You set up a laboratory here? Basic, but functional, James confirmed. I never stopped being a doctor. I just stopped practicing officially. And can you perform toxicology tests? Some, yes, mainly for common poisons and adulterated medications. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the following days, Sarah lived in anguished anticipation. Patricia was working behind the scenes, investigating Mrs. Margaret and gathering evidence. Meanwhile, life in the forest continued. Elizabeth proved to be a natural educator. She created a study routine for Benjamin and Noah that was both efficient and fun. The children were learning more in 1 week in the forest than in months at a traditional school. You should go back to teaching, Sarah commented. Maybe one day, Elizabeth replied, but there was hope in her voice for the first time in years. Ethan was also thriving. The baby had completely adapted to the natural environment and was developing motor skills by playing with elements of nature. "He's smarter," Sarah observed. "Children who grow up in contact with nature develop capacities that urban ones don't have," James explained. "Motor coordination, spatial perception, creativity. Have you ever thought about having other children?" The question came out spontaneously, but Sarah immediately realized she had touched on a delicate subject. "After we lost Michael and the baby we were expecting, we couldn't anymore," Elizabeth said sadly. "By choice, or the trauma affected my body too," Elizabeth explained. "It developed a condition that prevents pregnancies." Sarah felt a pang of pain for the couple. They clearly loved children and would have been wonderful parents. "But taking care of your children is being a unique experience," Elizabeth continued. "It's like I'm recovering a part of myself I thought I had lost forever." The following week, Patricia brought the first findings from the investigation. She met again with Sarah at the abandoned church, this time accompanied by a lawyer. "Sarah, brace yourself because the news is heavy," Patricia began. "Did they find evidence of the poisoning?" "More than that. We found evidence that this is not the first case. Mrs. Margaret has been married 3 times before. All 3 ex-husbands died under suspicious circumstances, always a few months after taking out large life insurance policies." Sarah felt her legs weaken. 3 husbands? "And in every case she ended up with considerable inheritances. The pattern is always the same. She marries younger, successful men, convinces them to take out high-value policies, and then... Why did no one ever suspect?" "Because she's very smart. She moved cities after each case, used slightly different names, and always waited years before acting again," the lawyer explained. "And David? How did she meet him?" "Apparently it was all planned. She researched him for months before approaching him as a concerned neighbor when he moved into the new apartment." Sarah remembered the story. Mrs. Margaret had helped David settle into the building where they lived, offering help with furniture and decoration. David always told that as an example of his mother's kindness. He wasn't her son. Her biological son, yes, but she had abandoned him as a baby and found him again as an adult, Patricia revealed. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. She abandoned David as a baby and spent 20 years looking for him, not out of maternal love, but because she discovered he had become financially successful. That's monstrous. "There's more," the lawyer continued. "We gained access to the medical files of the other 3 husbands. All showed symptoms similar to David's in the weeks leading up to their departure." "What kind of poison did she use?" "A combination of substances that mimic natural heart problems, very sophisticated and almost undetectable without specific tests," Patricia explained. "Almost undetectable?" "Dr. Thompson can detect it, provided we get material for analysis." Sarah thought of David's belongings that were still at Mrs. Margaret's house. "How are we going to get those things without raising suspicion?" "We're already working on that," the lawyer said mysteriously. Back in the forest, Sarah told the discoveries to James and Elizabeth. The couple listened in silence with increasingly grim expressions. "A serial killer," Elizabeth murmured, "and David was just another victim." "At least now we know you did the right thing by running," James said. "If she's capable of killing 3 husbands and a son..." "The children were never safe with her," Sarah added. "Neither were you," Elizabeth observed. "Her next step would probably have been to eliminate you too." The idea was terrifying, but it made sense. With Sarah out of the way, Mrs. Margaret would have total control over the children and all the money. "But do we have enough information to stop her now?" "We're getting there," James said. "Patricia is very competent. If anyone can gather enough evidence, it's her." 2 days later, Mr. Henry brought alarming news. "Mrs. Sarah, those men are back. This time they brought tracking dogs." Sarah's heart raced. "Tracking dogs?" "They're following your trail from the abandoned car," James said gravely. "We have to move. Today." "To where?" "There's another place I know. More remote, safer. But the children, they'll be fine. It's an adventure for them." Sarah looked at Benjamin and Noah, who were helping Elizabeth pack the essential belongings. "They really seem to be treating everything like a grand adventure. What if they find us anyway?" "They won't," James said with determination. I know this forest like the back of my hand." The move was quick and efficient. James and Elizabeth had prepared for situations like this over the past 15 years. Within hours, all evidence that they had lived in that place was eliminated. The new hideout was in a higher area of the mountains, accessible only by very narrow trails. It was a natural cave, more spacious than the previous one, with a spring of crystal-clear water inside. "Wow, it's like an adventure house," Noah exclaimed upon seeing the new place. "There's a waterfall inside the house," Benjamin added, fascinated. Even in the tense situation, Sarah smiled seeing her son's excitement. "How did you find this place?" "In the early years here, we explored every inch of these mountains," Elizabeth explained. "It was our way of dealing with the pain, walking, discovering, getting lost, and finding ourselves." "And have you lived here before?" "A few times when we needed to leave the main location for safety," James said. The organization of the new space revealed even more about the couple. They had supplies hidden in various locations throughout the forest, as if they were always prepared to flee. "Do you live in constant alert? When you mess with corruption schemes and powerful people, paranoia is a matter of survival," Elizabeth said sadly. That night, with the children sleeping soundly after the moving adventure, Sarah had a deeper conversation with James and Elizabeth. "I feel like I'm disrupting your lives," she said. "On the contrary," Elizabeth replied. "Caring for your children has brought more life to us than we've had in 15 years. But now we're all in danger because of me." "Sarah, you don't understand," James said. "Helping you is our way of honoring Michael's memory. It's our way of fighting the same people who destroyed our family." "Do you really think we can win?" "Yes," Elizabeth said with conviction, "because this time we're not alone. Patricia has contacts and resources we didn't have back then. And you have something we didn't have, living witnesses who can cooperate. The children." Benjamin saw the medication tampering. Noah may have seen other things, and you yourself must have memories that seemed insignificant at the time, but now make sense. Sarah spent the night trying to recall details from the last few months with David. There really were signs she had ignored. Conversations that stopped when she entered, documents David quickly hid, strange meetings at Mrs. Margaret's house. "He knew something," she murmured to herself. The next morning, Mr. Henry brought a message from Patricia. She had obtained some physical evidence and needed James to analyze it urgently. "How did she get it?" Sarah asked. "Better we don't know the details," James said. "Patricia has methods we prefer not to question." The evidence arrived by the end of the day. One of David's toothbrushes, a glass he used for taking vitamins, and a few strands of hair. James worked all night on his improvised analysis. Sarah couldn't sleep, pacing nervously around the cave while the children rested. "Everything will be okay," Elizabeth tried to reassure her. "What if it's not? What if the evidence isn't enough?" "Then we'll find another way," Elizabeth said with determination. "We won't give up." In the morning, James emerged from his makeshift laboratory with a grim expression. "I found traces of arsenic and digoxin," he announced. "What does that mean?" "That David was poisoned slowly over weeks. The combination of these substances causes symptoms that mimic natural heart problems." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and horror. Relief at having confirmation she wasn't going crazy. Horror at knowing David had suffered for weeks before passing. "Is this enough proof?" "For a homicide case, yes, especially combined with the other evidence Patricia collected." "What happens now?" "Now Patricia files the official complaint, and you can go back home." The idea of returning to civilization felt strange after weeks in the forest. The children had adapted so much to that life that Sarah wondered how the readjustment would be. "Are you going back too?" she asked James and Elizabeth. The couple exchanged a look. "We don't know yet," Elizabeth admitted. "It's hard to imagine going back to the world after so long. But you could help other people if you went back into practice. Elizabeth could teach. James could practice medicine again. Our licenses were revoked, remember," James said. "But if we prove you were victims of a setup, maybe you can be reinstated." Elizabeth looked at James with hope in her eyes. "It's possible," she said softly. "Patricia knows people who can help with that too," Sarah suggested. The prospect of a normal life again was tempting, but frightening at the same time. The next day, Patricia sent a message through Mr. Henry. Mrs. Margaret had been arrested. The poisoning evidence, combined with the investigations into the previous husbands, resulted in a formal charge of multiple homicide. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, barely able to believe it. "The criminal part, yes," James said. "But there are still legal matters regarding the children's custody and the inheritance. How long will that take? A few weeks, maybe a few months. But the important thing is that you're safe now." The children received the news with a mixture of relief and sadness. "Does that mean we won't live in the forest anymore?" Noah asked. "We're going back to our home," Sarah explained. "But I'm going to miss Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle James," Benjamin said. Sarah looked at the couple and realized they were also emotional about the imminent farewell. "Who said we're going to separate?" she said spontaneously. "You could come back with us. You could live with us." "Sarah, no, listen. You saved me. You saved my children. And more than that, you've become our family. Elizabeth, you're a better mother to my children than I sometimes manage to be. And James, you're the father figure they lost when David left." Elizabeth began to cry. That would be incredible," she whispered. "But our legal situation is complicated," James observed. "Then we'll fix that too. Patricia can help clear your names. And in the meantime, you stay with us as an aunt and uncle, as chosen family." The idea took shape in everyone's mind. An unconventional but real family, united not by blood but by shared experiences and mutual love. "The children would love that," Elizabeth said, looking at Benjamin and Noah playing with Ethan. "And so would I," Sarah admitted. "I don't know how I'll raise 3 children alone. With you by my side, I feel like I can face anything." James was pondering the practical implications. We would need documentation, a fixed address, proven income. "We'll figure it all out," Sarah said with determination, "step by step, like you taught me." The decision was made at that moment. They would return to civilization together and form a unique and special family. The preparations to leave the forest took a few days. James and Elizabeth had 15 years of life accumulated in those places. There was equipment that needed to be transported, medicinal plants that had to be carefully preserved, and memories that couldn't be left behind. 15 years summed up in a few boxes, Elizabeth observed melancholically. "Not summed up. These boxes are just objects. The 15 years are in you," Sarah said, "in the skills you developed, in the wisdom you gained, in the love you cultivated." "And now we'll use all that to build something new," James completed, with renewed hope in his voice. The children were excited about the move, but also nostalgic. "Can we come back to visit the forest sometimes?" Benjamin asked. "Of course," Elizabeth replied. "This will always be our special home." "And can we camp here on vacations?" Noah suggested. "Great idea," James smiled. "You can teach other kids how to live in nature." The prospect of periodically returning to the forest pleased everyone. It would be a way to maintain the connection with that transformative period of their lives. Patricia came personally to pick up the family in the last week. She had more news about Mrs. Margaret's case. "She confessed to everything," Patricia told them. "Not just the poisoning of David, but also the other 3 cases. She'll get life in prison. And the social worker who falsified my documents? Also arrested, along with 5 more people who were part of the scheme. How many families were harmed? Dozens, but now they will all get justice." Sarah felt a deep satisfaction. David had been avenged and other families wouldn't have to go through what she did. "And our legal situation?" James asked. "I'm already working on that," Patricia said. "With the evidence we have about the sabotage you suffered, I can get rehabilitation for both of you." "How long?" "A few months for Elizabeth, maybe a year for James. The medical board is stricter, but with the proof we have, it's a matter of time." The trip back to the city was surreal. After weeks in the forest, the movement of cars and the urban noise seemed strange. "Mommy, the houses are so tall," Noah observed, as if seeing buildings for the first time. "And there are so many people," Benjamin added. Even Ethan seemed bothered by the city sounds, preferring Elizabeth's lap to the stroller. Sarah had decided to sell the apartment where she lived with David. There were too many bad memories there. Instead, She rented a large house in the suburbs with a big backyard where the children could play, and James could cultivate his medicinal plants. "It's perfect," Elizabeth said, upon seeing the house for the first time. "It even has an area where I can give private lessons." The adaptation to the new life was gradual. The children went back to school, but Sarah chose an institution with alternative teaching methods, similar to what Elizabeth applied in the forest. James began informally seeing people in the area who couldn't afford expensive doctors. He used his knowledge of traditional medicine and medicinal plants to help with simple problems. Elizabeth offered free tutoring to underprivileged children in the neighborhood. In no time, she had a room full of students excited about her creative teaching methods. Sarah went back to work, but this time in something that truly fulfilled her. She created an NGO to help families who were victims of scams and fraudulent schemes. Patricia became her partner in the project. "We're turning our pain into strength to help others," Sarah reflected one night, seeing the family gathered in the living room. "It's what Michael would have wanted us to do," Elizabeth said, stroking Ethan, who slept in her lap. 6 months after leaving the forest, the good news they were waiting for arrived. "Elizabeth, your license has been reinstated," Patricia announced during a visit. "You can officially teach again." Elizabeth began to cry with emotion. 15 years of waiting had come to an end. "And James?" Sarah asked. "Just a few more weeks." "The medical board wants to do a practical evaluation, but everything indicates it will be approved." James tried to hide his emotion, but his eyes were misty. "I'll finally be able to officially help people again," he murmured. "You've always helped people," Sarah observed. "Now, you'll be able to do it without hiding." James's official rehabilitation came at the end of the year. On the same day, he received an offer to work at a community clinic serving the underprivileged. "It's perfect," he said. "I can use both traditional medicine and the natural methods I learned in the forest." The family's life found a harmonious rhythm. Sarah worked at the NGO in the morning and took care of domestic matters in the afternoon. Elizabeth taught at a nearby public school and gave private lessons at home. James divided his time between the clinic and home visits. The children flourished in this stable and loving environment. Benjamin became an excellent student and showed an interest in medicine, wanting to help people like Uncle James. Noah developed artistic talent and loved drawing plants and animals he remembered from the forest. Ethan grew up surrounded by affection, with 3 adults dedicated to his well-being. 1 year after leaving the forest, the family made their first trip back to visit the place where they had lived those transformative moments. "How everything seems small now," Benjamin observed upon seeing the old cave. "It doesn't seem small. We're the ones who grew," Elizabeth corrected, "inside and out." They spent the weekend camping, teaching Ethan to walk the trail, and reminiscing about stories from those difficult days that became the foundation of a new and better life. "You know what amazes me the most?" Sarah said, as they watched the stars on the last night. "How what seemed like the end of my life became the most beautiful new beginning I could imagine." "The greatest blessings sometimes come disguised as tragedies," Elizabeth philosophized. "And the worst situations can lead to the best encounters," James completed, looking at the family they had formed together. 2 years later, the family had settled completely into their new life. Sarah's NGO grew and had already helped hundreds of families. Elizabeth was promoted to pedagogical coordinator at her school. James became a reference in integrative medicine in the region. But the greatest joy came when Elizabeth discovered that, defying all medical predictions, she was pregnant. "How is this possible?" she asked the doctor, incredulous. "Sometimes when the body heals emotionally, it finds ways to heal physically too," the doctor explained. "It's rare, but it happens." The news was met with euphoria by the whole family. The children were excited at the prospect of having a brother or sister. Sarah felt honored to be part of this miracle. "Michael is going to have a little brother," Elizabeth murmured, touching her still discreet belly. "Or a little sister," James corrected, beaming with happiness. The pregnancy proceeded without complications. Elizabeth, at 48, was healthier than she had been in decades. The love and emotional stability she found with her chosen family had completely renewed her. During the months of waiting, they transformed one of the house's rooms into a nursery. Benjamin, Noah, and even Ethan, now 3 years old, helped with the decoration, creating an environment full of love and anticipation. "What are we going to name the baby?" Noah asked one night during dinner. "If it's a girl, Hope," Elizabeth said, "because that's what you brought into our lives." "And if it's a boy?" Benjamin wanted to know. "Gabriel," James answered, "in honor of the brother we lost." The decision was unanimous. Either way, the baby would be a celebration of the life and family they had built together. The birth happened on a spring morning. In an emotional twist of fate, James was the one who delivered his own daughter, for it was a girl. "Hope is here," he announced with tears in his eyes. The baby was born healthy and perfect. When Sarah saw her for the first time, she felt as if she was seeing a symbol of everything they had achieved together. The children fell in love with their little sister immediately. Benjamin proclaimed himself the official protector. Noah became the official artist, drawing portraits of the baby every day, and Ethan, now the big brother, showed a tenderness remarkable for his age. "Our family is complete," Sarah said, watching James rock Hope while Elizabeth rested. "It started with a tragedy and became the most beautiful thing in our lives," Elizabeth murmured, still exhausted but radiant. 3 years after Hope's birth, the family had found a perfect routine. Sarah's NGO became a national reference in combating family scams. Elizabeth published a book on alternative pedagogical methods based on her experience in the forest. James opened his own clinic that combined traditional and natural medicine. The children grew strong and healthy. Benjamin, now 14, already showed a talent for medicine and dreamed of following in James's footsteps. Noah, at 12, revealed himself as a talented artist and won drawing contests at school. Ethan, at 6, was a cheerful and intelligent child who loved exploring nature in the backyard. Hope, at 3, was a smart and affectionate little girl who brought the family even closer together. One Sunday afternoon, as everyone was gathered in the backyard, Sarah looked around and felt a deep gratitude. "You know what I'm thinking," she said. "What?" Elizabeth asked, playing with Hope in the sand. "If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be a mother of 5 and living in a family with 6 adults, I'd have thought they were crazy." "Technically, we're 2 adults and 4 children," James corrected, smiling. "No, we are a family of love, and that's all that matters." Benjamin stopped reading the medical book he was studying. "Mom, can I ask a question?" "Of course, son. Do you still feel angry at Grandma Margaret?" The question took Sarah by surprise. She thought for a moment. "No," she answered honestly, "because if it weren't for everything she did, we would never have met Uncle James and Aunt Elizabeth, and our family wouldn't exist." "So even bad people can unintentionally create good things?" Noah asked. "Sometimes the universe uses even the worst situations to lead us to where we're supposed to be," Elizabeth explained. "The important thing is to always choose love over hate. And to always fight for those we love," James added. Ethan, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, approached Sarah. "Mommy, I remember the forest a little. That's where our big family started, right?" "Yes, my love. It was in the forest that we discovered family isn't just who you're born with, but who you choose to stay with." Hope, who was playing in the sand, raised her arms to Sarah. "Up, Mama!" Sarah picked her up and felt her heart fill with peace. All the difficulties, all the suffering, all the pain had been worth it to reach that moment of complete happiness. "And now?" Elizabeth asked. "What's the next step in our adventure?" "To live each day with gratitude," Sarah replied, "and to keep helping other families find their path to happiness." "Like that new family that came to the NGO last week?" James asked. "Exactly. The mother is in the same situation I was in. We'll show her that there is always hope, there is always a way out, and there is always a family waiting to welcome those in need," Elizabeth finished. The sun was setting, tinting the backyard gold. The family gathered for dinner as they did every night. During the meal, each shared how their day had been, discussed plans for the future, and strengthened the bonds that united them. After dinner, as was tradition, they sat on the porch to watch the stars. Hope slept in Elizabeth's lap. Ethan snuggled between Sarah and James. Noah drew the constellations he could see. Benjamin read aloud a passage about natural medicine that he found interesting. Do you know what else I love about this family? Elizabeth said softly, so as not to wake Hope. What? Sarah asked. That each of us brought something special. Sarah brought courage and determination. James brought wisdom and care. I brought love and education. The children brought joy and hope. And together, we created something greater than the sum of its parts. A true family, James murmured. The best family in the world, Noah added without looking up from his drawing. Our Forest family, Ethan said sleepily. Forever, Benjamin finished. Sarah looked at the starry sky and remembered that terrible night, 5 years ago, when she fled with the children not knowing what the future held. She could never have imagined that desperate escape would lead to the greatest happiness of her life. Thank you, she whispered to the stars. For what? Elizabeth asked. For you. For this family. For everything. We're the ones who thank you, James said. You gave us back our lives. You saved me. You saved my children. And you gave me a larger, more loving family than I ever dreamed of having. The stars shone brightly that night, as if approving the happiness of that unique and special family that fate had formed deep in a forest, when all seemed lost, but which turned out to be just the beginning of a story of love, courage, and hope. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're listening from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe Sarah made the right decision in trusting James and Elizabeth? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.